There was a wild week 4 of NFL football, and you know what that means? It's time for the Sports Ball Network's Week 4 breakdown. Thursday night kicked off with a doozy of a game as the Detroit Lions dominated the Green Bay Packers en route to a 34-20 win. Detroit at 3-1 looks to be easily the favorite in the NFC North, and quite frankly, one of the favorites in the NFC. This Lions team, particularly their defense, has made huge leaps and bounds since last year and looks like they're ready to dominate the league. Meanwhile, things looked a lot murkier in Green Bay as quarterback Jordan Love struggled. I still think he's going to be fine for the future, and I think he's shown enough in these 4 starts for the team to give him some time to improve. But still, things are a bit more concerning. And with the Lions thoroughly dominant so far this season, I can't imagine the Packers doing any better than a wild card spot this year. On Sunday, things kicked off quite early as the Jacksonville Jaguars took on the Atlanta Falcons across the pond in London, winning 23-7. The Jaguars, the home team in this game, looked pretty comfortable, but it makes sense. London's pretty much their second home. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence looked all day long, and he made routine plays to keep the Jaguars ahead in this game. Quarterback Desmond Ridder of the Falcons, however, looked like he needed to be benched. All game long, he made terrible decisions and actively hurt the Falcons' chances of winning. This game was so bad for Desmond Ridder and the Falcons that now everyone's questioning whether or not he should remain the starter. Coach Arthur Smith, for now, has told everybody that Desmond Ridder is still the team's quarterback going into week 5. But one more performance like this, and I'd expect a change. Starting off our 1 p.m. slate of games, we had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers improve to 3-1 on the season as they easily dispatched the New Orleans Saints 26-9. At this point, the Bucs look to be the easy favorite in the NFC South, and quarterback Baker Mayfield continues to impress, throwing for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kudos to him and this team. I really did not think they were going to be here at this point in the season. For the Saints, quarterback Derek Carr struggled through his AC injury, throwing for only 127 yards. However, there was some good news for New Orleans here. Running back Alvin Kamara came back from his 3-game suspension and immediately made an impact, catching 13 of his 14 targets. Continue to watch him and this New Orleans offense as they continue to gel this season. I think things are going to look better in the future, especially as Derek Carr's health improves. Don't count the Saints out yet in this division, especially because I think, despite today, they still have a top 10 defense. The Texans thoroughly dominated the Pittsburgh Steelers at home, winning 30-6. They look to be one of the most fun teams in the league this year, and one that I'm personally enjoying watching. Rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud has been an absolute sensation for them, throwing for 306 yards in this game, along with 2 touchdowns. Running back Dameon Pierce also got back to form, rushing for 81 yards and hauling in a 27-yard reception. Expect him and the Texans' offense to continue to soar as the offensive line gets healthier. Meanwhile, on the other side for Pittsburgh, everything was rough. The defense struggled against C.J. Stroud and the Texans' offensive attack, and quarterback Kenny Pickett looked like he was seeing ghosts out there all game long. Even worse for the second-year starter is that he suffered a bone bruise injury in his knee that could cause him to miss some time. This one is an injury to monitor, especially considering the Steelers are still somewhat in playoff contention here. Kenny Pickett misses any time, Mitch Trubisky's the next guy up. The LA Rams and the Indianapolis Colts went back and forth in a 29-23 overtime thriller that saw rookie sensation Puka Nacua haul in his first NFL touchdown pass to win the game. Matthew Stafford and the Rams in the first half of this game looked absolutely dominant, rushing out to a big lead early on. However, by the end of the second half, it was Anthony Richardson and the Colts with all of the momentum as they stormed back to tie the game and force overtime. Ultimately, though, as I said earlier, the Rams ended up winning 29-23 in overtime. a win which they desperately needed to keep pace in a tough NFC that's seeing a number of teams potentially emerge for a wildcard spot. The Colts, on the other hand, although they lost, have to be encouraged. Quarterback Anthony Richardson impressed once again, throwing for 2 touchdowns and 200 yards, as well as rushing for 56 yards and a touchdown. If you have him on your fantasy team, you might have had the pickup of the century in your draft. I expect the Colts to continue to improve as well now that Jonathan Taylor may be playing week 5. The Dolphins, with all the momentum in the world off of their 70-20 win over the Denver Broncos, took on the Buffalo Bills this weekend and pretty much got smacked back to reality. Buffalo easily won this game 48-20, with Josh Allen absolutely going ballistic, throwing for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns, as well as rushing in for a 5th score. He thoroughly took over and dominated this game, and at this point, firmly entrenched himself in the early MVP conversation. If Josh Allen plays like this all year, Buffalo has to be one of the Super Bowl favorites. But of course, the past couple of years, Buffalo has collapsed into the playoffs, so only time will tell with them. Meanwhile, for Miami, defensive issues came to the forefront as they gave up 48 points to a Buffalo Bills team that did not stop their onslaught. Tua and the offense, meanwhile, after keeping pace with Buffalo in the first quarter, pretty much ran out of gas and struggled against the strong Buffalo Bills defense for the rest of the game. If Miami still has any hopes of winning this division and wants to avoid being relegated to a wild card spot, they really need to clean up some of the mistakes that they made in this game. Playing like this against the top teams in the AFC, like the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Buffalo Bills, is not going to be acceptable. And if they do, there's no way they're going to make the Super Bowl this year. It's Tank Bowl time, and in this week's first Tank Bowl, we had the 0-3 Denver Broncos visiting the 0-3 Chicago Bears, fighting for the title of worst team in the NFL. Yeah, we'll get into the other Tank Bowl later in this episode, but I do believe that title was on the line in this game because both of these teams looked really, really terrible through the first 3 games they played. Denver, of course, gave up 70 points in a single game to Miami, and Chicago has been so terrible that many people, including myself, think they have a pretty realistic chance of going 0-17. Let's get into this one. So, believe it or not, Chicago actually came out swinging in this game. They looked absolutely dominant in the first half. And by the third quarter, they had accrued a 28-7 lead over a hapless Denver Broncos. The Broncos defense continued their woes from last week and made Justin Fields look like Patrick Mahomes on steroids. And before we get into how this game ended, I just want to take a minute to applaud Justin Fields. He played his absolute heart out here. He threw for over 300 yards, completing 28 of his 35 passes for 335 yards for 4 touchdowns as well, and ran for another 25 on the ground. Of course, we'll talk about how his game ended and how he contributed to this Bears loss, but that's a little bit later on. Denver did not give up and by some miracle managed to claw their way back to a 28-28 tie. What I think is more impressive about that, though, is the fact that Denver's defense did not give up any points as they were mounting this comeback. His defense has been terrible all year long, and defensive coordinator Vance Joseph is likely to get fired in the coming weeks. But still, props to Denver here. They showed some real grit and moxie in coming back into this game. Of course, Chicago then had the ball, and they were marching down the field with a chance to kick a potential game-winning field goal, and they fumbled. All right, that's fine. Denver marched down the field. They kicked a field goal. They're now up 31-28, and Justin Fields drew an interception. And Chicago lost in their own 4. If you're a Bears fan, you have to be heartbroken here. Justin Fields at this point, despite his mostly stellar performance here, has pretty much proven he's not going to be the answer to all of the Bears' woes. And nor should he be expected to. The Chicago coaching staff put him in a terrible position at the end of this game. And really, Justin Fields should not have been passing the ball as Chicago was marching down, needing a field goal to get this game into overtime. Uh, I mean, there's really not much to say here. Chicago imploded on itself in the end, and this could have major ramifications for their season and for the franchise's future. For Denver, they improved to 1-3, but they might also be losers here in this tank bowl, as that might be too many wins to get Caleb Williams. Only time will tell here, but Denver won. Uh, Congratulations to them. This game, which would have been very exciting by all means, was quite the snoozer as quarterback Deshaun Watson for Cleveland was a surprise scratch going into Sunday morning, despite the fact that there were multiple indications earlier in the week that he would be able to play. Cleveland, forced to start rookie Dorian Thompson Robinson, absolutely struggled on offense, only managing to score 3 points in a 28-3 loss to Baltimore. The rookie quarterback had 3 interceptions and really could not get anything going in the passing game. The top receiver for the Browns was tight end David Njoku, who had 6 receptions for 46 yards. And the next highest receiver on the Browns, Elijah Moore, only had 2 catches for 20. Baltimore, on the other hand, had no such issues on offense as Lamar Jackson calmly led the team down the field all game long, throwing for 2 touchdowns and rushing for another 2. Really, Baltimore looks like they're going to be the favorite in the AFC North. And at this point, with the Bengals struggling and Joe Burrow hurt, the Steelers really not looking good at all, and the Browns injured, I really think this is Baltimore's division to lose here. Of course, if the Browns get healthy and they remain close enough, they could potentially sneak in and win the division title. But at this point, I think we can pencil in that we're going to be seeing some playoff football in Baltimore come January. There was a second tank bowl in the NFL this weekend as the 0-3 Panthers took on the 0-3 Minnesota Vikings. Although I wouldn't necessarily call this one a tank bowl in the sense like Bears Broncos was. I really think the Vikings are better than their record, and particularly when you look at the performances of quarterback Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, you would expect this team to have a couple more wins than they do. But all's well that ends well for Minnesota here. They ended up pulling out a 21-13 victory, and ironically, this is the first game of the season where Kirk Cousins looked human. He only threw for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he also had 2 interceptions. So, not a very MVP like day for him in what has otherwise been a MVP level season for the quarterback. But I think he'll take the win instead. The Vikings, though, need to make a choice here. At 1-3, they could have an outsider's chance to make the wild card at this point, considering Detroit looks absolutely dominant and will likely cruise the division title. But should they choose to look towards the future, I wouldn't be too surprised if we see Kirk in another jersey at some point this season. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Minnesota and their brass do here. And if they do decide to play for the future, there are a few teams that I think would be more than happy to have Kirk Cousins under center. Panthers, meanwhile, continue their march towards the bottom of the league standings as rookie quarterback Bryce Young looked to struggle once more. Not that his stat line was bad. He completed 25 of his 32 passes for 204 yards, no interceptions, but no touchdowns as well. But he just looks like he's having trouble processing the game right now. He's a rookie, so I expect this to improve over time. But still, looking at the other success of the rookie quarterbacks so far, you would think Panthers fans might be getting a little bit worried here. Still, Bryce Young's got a lot of time and he has a lot of talent. So the future's still bright in Carolina. It's a little less bright, of course, when you remember that the Chicago Bears have their first round pick. But hey, we're looking for small victories here. I really do hate this team sometimes. The Philadelphia Eagles continue to baffle me and the rest of their fans as they continue to struggle to a 4-0 record to start the season, barely beating the Washington Commanders 34-31 in overtime. Jalen Hurts looked much better than he did these past 3 weeks, throwing for 319 yards and 2 touchdowns. But more importantly, made consistently elite throws and wowed people with his arm strength. I'm not worried about Jalen, and I really wasn't, but it was a bit concerning to see his regression at first, so I'm glad to see that he's starting to put it together here. I think he's going to be fine, and really, I think Philadelphia is going to be fine. Should be one of the favorites in the NFC still, but of course, it's still concerning to see them play this team so close. Of course, Washington took advantage of the fact that the Eagles' defense seemingly did not want to cover anybody, and quarterback Sam Howell lit up the Eagles' secondary to the tune of 290 yards and a clutch last second touchdown to send the game to overtime. Through the first 5 games of his career, Sam Howell looks pretty legitimate, and Washington fans should have a lot of hope for the future. I truly think he was impressive on Sunday, bouncing back after a rough performance in Buffalo. And he made routine throws that I did not think he was going to be able to make. Washington might not win this year, but with a potential starting quarterback on the roster and a lot of talent on this team, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple years down the line, people are taking this team a lot more seriously. Bengals fans, it's time to panic. When you lose to the Titans 27-3 with quarterback Joe Burrow struggling to throw 165 yards on 20 of 30 completions, you know things are bad. Joe Burrow all game long took hits that made me wince in pain. And considering the fact that he's already hobbled by a hamstring injury, I wouldn't be too upset if the Bengals choose to shut him down for a little bit. At this point, I truly think him playing is not only detrimental to his health, but detrimental to the team's chances this year. And really, you have to think long term here. If Joe Burrow keeps getting hit like this over and over and over again, we might not be seeing him play football within the next 5 years. It's not bad. For Tennessee, this game was all about the defense and Derrick Henry, who absolutely dominated the Bengals all game long. The defense, of course, only allowed 3 points and had 3 brutal sacks on Joe Burrow. But really, we're rushing him in the Bengals offense all game long. Derrick Henry rounded back to his usual form, rushing for 122 yards and a touchdown, catching a reception for 11 yards, and throwing for a 2-yard touchdown pass. Derrick Henry showed he is still very much an elite player on this team and really the lifeblood of the Tennessee Titans and really willed this team to a win. Now, every single team in the AFC South is tied for the division lead at 2-2. It's going to be really interesting to see how things shake out here the next few weeks. In the first afternoon game of this week, Coach Belichick was foiled in his attempt to get his 300th regular season win as the Patriots were absolutely embarrassed by the Cowboys 38-3 in what was the worst loss in the Belichick era. I really can't blame Bill too much for this one. You know, I'm a huge fan of his, and I do believe he is still an absolutely elite coach at the NFL level. Especially considering quarterback Mac Jones threw 2 horrible interceptions and had to get benched in the middle of the third quarter for Bailey Zappi. The Mac Jones experiment in New England is officially over, I think, and the Patriots should absolutely be in the market for one of these top rookie quarterback prospects next year. But the problem here is that their coach is Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick is really, really good at football. So I don't know if the Patriots are going to actually lose enough to get one of these top prospects. They could, of course, trade up, but that depends on whether or not ownership, who still seemingly is attached to Mac Jones for some reason, actually wants to. Gotta feel for those New England Patriots fans in their 20 years of sustained success. Really, they have gone through it this century. Not really much here to say about the Dallas Cowboys. They had a sorely needed bounce back game. Defense looked great, and the offense was efficient. This is just a good team. Do I think they're going to beat the Eagles, the Niners, or the Lions? No, probably not. At least if the Eagles play to their full potential. But Dallas should be a contender all year long. Give props to the Arizona Cardinals here. This game was really competitive going into the fourth quarter, as they were only down 21-16. Of course, Christian McCaffrey then proceeded to take over and absolutely obliterate them on defense, ending the game in a 35-16 Niners rout. But still, they played tough, hard-nosed football for the first three quarters. Joshua Dobbs looked really good once again, throwing for 265 yards and 2 touchdowns to go along with 48 rushing yards on the ground. And he really looks like a guy who stepped up as a leader for this team this year. I'm really happy for him. 49ers, of course, were led by Christian McCaffrey, who ran for 106 yards and 3 touchdowns, as well as brought in 7 receptions for 71 yards and another score. He absolutely took over this game and really proved why he might be the best offensive skill player in the NFL. Quarterback Brock Purdy had another efficient day at the office, only missing on a single one of his pass attempts, throwing for 283 yards and that touchdown to Christian McCaffrey, and then running the ball in for a touchdown on 2 carries. He looks good. And you know what? He's proven a lot of the doubters who thought he was just a system quarterback wrong so far. Brock Purdy's legit. And that makes the San Francisco Niners perhaps one of the most scary, if not the scariest teams in the NFL right now. Chargers fans who want Brandon Staley fired, look away. Your team won 24-17 in an exciting game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Justin Herbert, of course, did his usual thing. He ran for 2 touchdowns and threw for another. And really, it was the Chargers defense that stepped up in this one, as Khalil Mack had 6 sacks against his former team, absolutely taking over the game. Meanwhile, for the Raiders, Josh Jacobs finally had himself a good game this year, rushing for 58 yards and a score and hauling in 8 receptions for 81 yards. Rookie quarterback Aiden O'Connell kept things interesting late into the fourth quarter, but he did throw the game-sealing interception and very much looked like a rookie. If the Raiders want to salvage their season at all, they're going to need Jimmy Garoppolo back, and they're going to need him back fast. Otherwise, I think their fan base should start looking towards the draft. I gotta admit, this Sunday night football game was a lot more interesting than I thought it would be, as the New York Jets fought the Kansas City Chiefs all the way to the end, eventually falling 23-20. Zach Wilson in this game looked great. He was making high-level NFL throws and looked to potentially save his career with this performance, throwing for 245 yards and 2 touchdowns to go along with 2 carries on the ground for 14 yards and a 2-point conversion. Of course, there was that key fumble at the end of the game that gave Kansas City possession, but I don't think that one was all on Zach. The snap was low and to the left, and really, I don't think Zach had much of a chance to get that thing and make something out of that play. Really, Jets fans have to be encouraged by what they saw last night, even though they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. This season absolutely looks salvageable for this team, and with the Denver Broncos on tap next, I fully expect the Jets to continue this momentum that they've suddenly found, particularly on offense. Meanwhile, the Kansas City Chiefs came out hot as Isaiah Pacheco ran all over the New York Jet defense for 115 yards and a touchdown to go along with his 3 receptions for 43 yards. But they considerably cooled off in the second half, and Patrick Mahomes had 2 very costly interceptions and should have had a third that was called back on a pretty egregious penalty. But, of course, Patrick Mahomes, being Patrick Mahomes, ended up sealing the game on a clutch run late into the fourth quarter, and the Chiefs escaped here. Kansas City's somewhat like the Philadelphia Eagles here. They're not starting off the way that people would expect them to be, and they look somewhat slow in these first four games. Unlike the Philadelphia Eagles, though, Kansas City's not in the easier NFC conference. They're in a brutal AFC, and I think personally, for them to really make a repeat run here, they need to figure out things fast, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Of course, with Coach Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes leading the way, I expect them to, but still, I think there are struggles here, and they need to figure things out fast, especially if they want to beat a team like Buffalo. The New York Giants and the Seattle Seahawks played something akin to a football game on Monday to wrap up week 4, and it was the Seattle Seahawks that thoroughly dominated New York all night long. The Seattle defense really takes the credit for this one as they sacked quarterback Daniel Jones 11 times. 11. That's insane. The Seahawks also had 2 touchdowns, a fumble recovery, and a defensive touchdown on this game. And really, they terrorized the Giants' offense all night long. Uh, I think right now, if I was in New York, I'd rather be a Jets fan. They at least have some hope here. The Giants, on the other hand, look like they've reverted back to their 2021 form. And quarterback Daniel Jones continues to struggle as he threw 2 interceptions, lost a fumble, and very nearly lost a second one at the end of the game. Uh, Personally, I'm surprised he wasn't pulled. But then again, I don't think it is all on Daniel, considering he got sacked 11 times. And really, the Giants defense has their role in this game, too. New York's just a mess, and they need to figure things out fast if they want to repeat their miracle performance last year that enabled them to make the playoffs. Otherwise, it could be a very, very long year for Giants fans. And with Daniel Jones still under contract through 2025, could be a long couple of years for that. Thanks again for watching the Sports Ball Network's NFL Week 4 breakdown. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in Week 5.